all to today's class of governance. Today we are starting a new subject, that is governance. My name is Harshmeet Singh and I will be a faculty for this subject. Good morning everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope all of you are doing good. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let others also join and then we'll begin the class. Good morning, good morning, good morning everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you, Vansi. Good morning. Hello, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Yes, Jagbandhu. Nayak. Lakshmi saying, should we make running notes for governance? I don't think you need to make running notes for governance as such. You will get a lot of things in the PPT itself and in the material that you will get. I would not say you have to make your notes once again for governance. Thank you, Miswa. Same here, Chaitanya. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you, Amrit. Ilma, do you have to copy what exactly? Atma, for any questions regarding your schedule, etc., you can get in touch with the mentors and they will help you out with your schedule. I'm not really aware of what schedule you have exactly. Yes, Chirantan, evening batch also will be taken by me. Yes, Kausar, I will be in the evening class as well. Thank you, Hariom. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Perfect. So it's 6:02 already. Once again, a very, very, very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. It's early morning, it's 6 a.m., but I'm very glad to see all of you joining in right here on time. Today marks the beginning of a new subject, that is governance. Governance will be covered in about 9 classes. So starting from today, we'll be starting our discussion on governance. As you know, governance is a part of mainly the mains examination. So if you see in the mains exam in GS2 paper, we have polity and governance. So this is where governance actually is. However, there are some topics of governance that might feature in the prelims exams as well. For example, in this due course of governance, we will be discussing topics such as the RTI, such as the CAG, such as the Lokpal. All these topics have a potential to be asked in the prelims exam as well. And that is why during this entire course of the governance, we will not just be focusing on the mains examination point of view or mains answer writing. We will also be focusing on the prelims examination point of view, questions that you can expect from the prelims point of view, so on and so forth. Before we begin analyzing or before we start going ahead with the entire syllabus, a very quick refresher about what exactly we'll be studying in governance. What do we have in store for you in the entire syllabus? What is it that you have to keep in mind? Any books, etc., that you have to refer? Let's first go through that very quickly. So these are the main topics that will be covered in the entire syllabus of governance. We'll be starting our discussion with transparency and accountability. So just to tell you, in transparency accountability, what exactly will we be studying? We'll be studying about RTI, that is right to information. In accountability, we will be studying about something called Citizens Charter. And apart from that, we'll also be discussing the CAG. What is the CAG? How does it work? What are the problems with the CAG? All these things will be discussed. Then we'll talk about corruption. How can we prevent corruption? So over here, we'll talk about the law called Prevention of Corruption Act. Prevention of Corruption Act. How is it that the government is trying to stop corruption? We'll talk about Citizen Charter, important aspects of governance. What is e-governance? How does it work? What are the various aspects of e-governance? Then we'll also be discussing the role of civil services in democracy. Once you become a civil servant, what exactly are you expected to do? What is the role that you're expected to perform in the society? What is it that the civil servants do? Then we will also be discussing important provisions of Indian constitution with the constitutions of other countries, which is also a part of GS2. For example, we'll be discussing main features of Indian constitution versus the features of the American constitution or the British constitution, French constitution, etc. So we'll be comparing that as well. Apart from that, we'll also be discussing important recommendations of the second ARC. You all would have seen, and many people would have suggested you as well about the second ARC, the Administrative Reforms Commission, whatever suggestions they gave are extremely important. So we'll be discussing their reports, what suggestions exactly did they give, and how can we use that in the examinations as well. Now coming to one question that many of you have. Whenever a new subject starts, obviously the first question that most people have is which book to refer, which book not to refer. Now for governance specifically, I would not subscribe or prescribe any specific book to you. Although there are a lot of books in the market that you can see, Lakshmikant itself publishes a book for governance. There are other authors also that publish governance-related books. However, it is a subject which is really based on your current affairs knowledge. It is based on how many current affair examples can you give in your answers. It is based on what you know about what is going on in the government right now. This is based on those. It's not really based on some bookish knowledge. So I would not really advise you or suggest you to take one single book only. Rather than that, my suggestion would be to focus a lot on classroom, focus on the PPTs, the content that you get here, and also when you read current affairs, when you read newspapers, etc., from those also extract knowledge on these topics. The more examples that you give in governance answers, the better your answer will always be. Please do remember. If you still think that you have to go ahead and buy governance book of M. Lakshmikant, entirely up to you. I'm no one to stop you. You can go ahead, but I do not think that is really necessary or sufficient. Most of the questions for governance in the question paper can be solved very easily based on our classroom discussion that we are going to have, the newspaper reading, etc. So if you are well versed with that, I do not think that you need to go ahead with any book. But again, if you really think so, you can. It's entirely up to you. It is not suggested from my end personally. Now, let's start with what are the topics that we'll be discussing today. We'll start with the first topic for governance, that is transparency. Now, what exactly is transparency? Is it required? Is it not required? Let's go ahead with that. I'm sure all of you know, ever since we were in class 4th, 5th, in science, we were told the definition of transparent, right? There are some things that are transparent and something which are opaque. Transparent in simple terms means something that you can look through. Water is transparent. So if you can look through something, that is transparent. If you cannot look through something, that is opaque. Now, what are we discussing about transparency right now? In governance, the concept of transparency means government, the rulers, the administrators, they should be transparent. Transparent in the sense, we as the general public, we as the citizens of India, for example, have the right to know how the government is working. We as the citizens of the country have the right to know why is the government taking such a decision, where is the government spending all our money, because at the end of the day, government is being run on our money. Let me give you a very simple example. For example, let's say that right now, Government of India announces that we are spending a certain amount of rupee to set up a hospital, especially for COVID-19. Because the COVID-19 hospital, just an example, is being built because of our money, we deserve to know where the government is spending all that money. We deserve to know how much government is spending. We deserve to know who is building this hospital. Is it a private company building a hospital? Is it the Government of India building the hospital? That's a very simple example of transparency, that the governments should be transparent. The government should tell the people, the government should tell the citizens what exactly are they doing and how is the government working. Now, a very simple question. Do you think the governments are transparent? Or let me ask you in another way. Do you think the governments would want to be transparent? What do you think? Would the government really want to be transparent? No, absolutely no, right? The governments obviously would not want to be transparent. Why would the governments not want to be transparent? See, it's a very simple logic. The governments across the world, and again, please remember, when I say the government, I don't really mean only the Indian government or only the present government. When I say the word government, it applies to almost all the governments around the world. Governments usually do a lot of stuff which general common people do not know. I'll give you a simple example. Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Have you heard of something called Baluchistan? Have you heard of something called Baluchistan? Okay, many people have. Good. Some people would not have. No. Okay, perfect. So those who know, good. Those who don't know, let me tell you what exactly is this. So Baluchistan is a province of Pakistan. It's their most poor or the poorest of all the provinces. So when India got partitioned, Pakistan was created. In Pakistan also, there is this area called Baluchistan, this province, where people of Baluchistan have been demanding independence from Pakistan. They say that our tribal culture is very different. We don't want to be a part of Pakistan. We'll remain separate. That is why Pakistan government also has not really invested a lot of money in Baluchistan. Pakistan government keeps on saying that India indirectly supports the Baluch leaders, that India gives money to the leaders of Baluchistan, that India gives weapons to the leaders of Baluchistan. Now, government of India has never officially accepted this. Why would we accept this? Why would we accept that, yes, we are helping someone in another country? But there are multiple people at the top level who have written in their books how India is in very, very close contact with the people of Baluchistan. Because every country does that. This is what the responsibility of secret services or the intelligence agencies is, to make sure that a country is safeguarded. Doesn't matter if you have to do something which is illegal, doesn't matter if you have to do something dark or shady. The government would not want you to know about it, but it is the case. Most governments across the world actually ensure that they are listening into people's calls, that they are taping people's phones, but the government will not tell you about it. Why? Because the government says they are doing it in the larger interest. I'll give you one more example. Do you know, for example, uh, there was a movie that was recently released. Did you see this movie called IB-71? I did not see it. I just saw the trailer, but I know the story. Did you see that movie IB-71 was recently released? Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you what okay, let's not talk about movie. Let me talk about what the incident was. Okay. Let's not talk about the movie. If you have seen it, great. If you have not seen it, don't worry. Let me tell you what the incident was. So basically what happened in 1971, India and Pakistan fought a war. It was a war about Bangladesh, right? So if let's assume this is Bangladesh, this is Pakistan, and in the middle is India, right? So in 1971, this Bangladesh war was being fought. India had this issue. India did not want Pakistan to fly their planes over India and come to Bangladesh. Because you all remember, Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan only, right? Bangladesh was nothing but East Pakistan. Pakistan had two parts when it got partition. There was West Pakistan, that you call Pakistan today. There was East Pakistan. So what happened was, Pakistan was supplying all the different types of weapons, etc. to Bangladesh. India did not want that to happen. India wanted to stop Pakistan's planes flying over India. But how would India do that? Because this will be against international law. You can't just stop a country from flying their plane over your country unless you have a good reason for that. So what did India do? India hijacked their own plane. So what happened was, two officers from our own intelligence agency, RAW, they hijacked an Indian plane saying that we are Pakistani hijackers, we have hijacked the plane. Pakistan had nothing to do with it. That plane got hijacked, it was then stopped, and then we started blaming Pakistan for it. Pakistan said, "Arey, I had nothing to do with it. If I would have had something to do with it, I would have accepted it." But India said, no, you have hijacked our plane. Now we will not allow you to fly over our country because you're a security threat now. So this is how the countries operate. And I have seen the trailer of the movie. I've not seen the movie. If I'm right, this is the movie based on that only. It was, and you can Google it also. It was called the Ganga hijacking. The Ganga airplane hijacking. If you Google it, you will get the entire story. So what happened was this, there are a couple of people who hijacked this, and they even started demanding that we want certain terrorists to be released from the prison of India, and all of that was bogus. None of that was true. It was done just because the Indian government wanted a reason to ensure that we do not allow Pakistan's plane to fly over us. Pulkit is saying, how do we know this now? Because Pulkit, now it is common knowledge. It was revealed by a lot of government sources much later on. It was not revealed at that point of time. What did you do? But it was revealed much later on. Now there are books written on it. There are, as I said, there's a movie also made on it now. So you can Google Ganga airplane hijacking and you will get to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, coming back to the original idea. The original idea is, ideally the government should be transparent, but we all know for a fact, governments are not 100% transparent. They might have their own reasons. Their biggest reason, what they give, is national security. They always say national security comes first, national interest comes first. It is over and above the interest of any individual. And that is why the governments are not exactly transparent. Because just imagine, at that point of time when the Indian government had this plan that let's hijack our own plane, do you think the Indian government should have written that in the newspaper to be transparent? No, because the plan would not have worked. So you cannot expect the government to be transparent all the time. But this is the problem. How do you decide at what point of time national interest is more important, and at what point of time do you decide that individual safety or individual freedom is more important? I'll give you a few more examples of transparency as we go on. The simple idea of transparency, as I said, is people like us, common citizens, we have the right to know what the government is doing based on the simple idea that, number one, government is running because of your and my contribution. It is your taxes due to which the government is running. If people of India don't pay taxes, government will not be able to work. As simple as that. Second reason, in a democracy, we elected our government. So we have the right to know why they are working, how they are working, right? Government cannot say, we'll not tell you, because we elected the government. The government is answerable to us. This is where transparency comes into the picture. We have the right to know where the government is spending money, how the government is spending money, what are the government decisions that are being taken. All of that is a part of transparency. Now, let me ask you this question. Do we have transparency in India? Abhijit, yes, we will be discussing what OSA. Do we have transparency in India? And if yes, how exactly? If yes, how exactly? Yes, I'm getting a lot of answer like no, really, partial, etc. My question is, how really do we have transparency? In what way? In what law? Yes, the simple answer to this has to be RTI, the most prominent law in India. The most prominent law in India that has been introduced to ensure transparency in the working of the government, to ensure transparency between us and the people. We have something called the RTI. RTI stands for Right to Information. We will be discussing about RTI in a lot of detail going ahead. Now, why do we need transparency? Simple idea. Transparency means people are much more accountable. I'll give you a simple idea. You tell me very honestly. You tell me very honestly. If your parents had access to your phone, listen to this very carefully. If your parents had access to your phone, they have your phone, they know your password, would it change how you operate your phone? What do you think? Would it change how you operate your phone or not? The things that you see on the phone, what you do on the phone, would it change what you do, right? You will be much more accountable. Simple. You will be much more accountable. Why? Because transparency brings in accountability. See, there are a few people who are saying no. Very good. I hope that your parents know how good kid they have. But most of the people are saying yes. So if you are saying no, great. God bless you. May you become even stronger and even more transparent. But for common people like most of us, including me, a lot of things would change, right? This is because again, at the end of the day, transparency brings an accountability. Now, the same logic applies to government. The same logic applies to government. When the government knows, or when an IAS officer or a collector knows that his or her decisions are being seen by the common people, the common people can ask a question. Then obviously they will be much more accountable. Accountable means being responsible for your actions. If something wrong happens, you will be held responsible. So transparency obviously brings in more accountability, as simple as that. Reduces corruption and abuse of power as well. The 2 points are very much related to each other. As a DM, as a collector, or as a minister, if you know that your decisions can be questioned by someone, you automatically would be much, much more careful in taking the decisions. Thus, it increases the efficiency of the government and opens up the government to public scrutiny as well. All of these are the reasons why we should have a transparent government. At the end of the day, common people should have the right to know how the government exactly is working. Not just this, it also empowers us. It corrects the asymmetry of power between people and government. Now, what do we mean by this? Asymmetry of power means, see, logically speaking, power of people and the power of government is not the same. Government is much, much more powerful. You can say ideally people are very powerful, but you all know government is much more powerful. Government can arrest you. You cannot arrest the government. As simple as that. So obviously, people and government are not on the same power level as us. However, having transparency, having laws such as RTI actually allows the people to feel more powerful. It promotes people's participation in governance. It allows the people to ask questions to the government. Has any one of you, for example, or has any one of you here filed an RTI ever? I'll show you today how to file an RTI, by the way, don't worry. So that all of you can do that. It's pretty easy. Has anyone filed an RTI here? No, 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 no. 1 or 2 years in between. Most of you have not filed an RTI. Most of you have not. Okay, don't worry. I'll tell you how to file an RTI. Very simple, very easy. You can do it online. Don't have to go anywhere. Just have to spend 10 rupees and you will be able to do that. Okay, perfect. Apart from that, it also helps in correcting the trust deficit. Now, correcting trust deficit is also extremely important. The problem is you will trust your government, you will trust your leaders only when you think that they are doing the right thing. If you think that your government is not doing the right thing, you will not trust them enough. You will not participate in governance. I'll give you one more example related to this. How many of you, by the way, have read world history? How many of you have read world history? Okay, most of you have read world history. Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. So in world history, okay, some of you have, some of you have not. Don't worry, don't worry. Don't worry, this is not a world history lecture. If you have not, either way, it doesn't really matter. Tell me this, in world history, you read about something called the Cold War, right? Or end of the Cold War. Read about something like this. Okay. Okay, let me tell you something. Try and understand this. You can stop writing now. Try and understand what I'm trying to tell you. I am trying to tell you 100% transparency is also not a good thing, and it has been proven in the past as well. I'll give you a simple example. Listen to me very carefully. So, USSR, the Soviet Union of the earlier times, they used to run their country in a very different way. USSR gave almost no information to their citizens about how the government is working. Whatever government contracts were signed, people had no idea about that. For example, in India right now, if you want, you can get to know what is the cost of the new parliament building, right? There is no compulsion on that. If you want, you can get to know who built the new parliament building. You can get to know what cost did it make. You can get to know who was the contractor. You can get to know every single thing about that. There is no compulsion on that. On the other hand, we have a situation in USSR. We had a situation in USSR where they did not tell their people anything. What happened was in USSR, and it's a part of world history, so I'm not going to a lot of details like that. But in USSR, people's standard of living was declining. Economy did not have a lot of money. People were very poor. So USSR was going through a very tough time in 1970s, 1980s. In the middle of 1980s, there came a person called Mikhail Gorbachev, who became the General Secretary of USSR. He started a new law. His new law was, he said that now government will be open to people. He said that enough of closed government. Now people should be allowed to ask questions. Whatever questions people want, you can ask the government and the government will reply. He thought that this will improve the trust between the government and the people. It will help in correcting the trust deficit, because he attended my governance classes and he thought, and he read this point, it will help in correcting trust deficit. So Mikhail Gorbachev thought, let me try that out. So he tried that out, that let me see if it can actually improve the trust deficit. So what happened was, now people started asking questions to the government, to the USSR government. Questions such as, in how much money this contract was made, in how much money this road was built, in how much money the bridge was built, how much money have we spent in wars, so on and so forth. All these questions came up. What happened was, once this information started coming out, one after the other, there were a lot of scams and corruption scandals that started coming into public light. People all of a sudden got to know that we are poor because our ministers are so rich, because all the ministers were eating government money in every government contract. So when government became transparent, it backfired, because people now got to know that they are poor because the government is rich, that the government officers, the government ministers are so corrupt that in every single agreement they have taken some money for themselves. There were secret deals that USSR had signed with different governments during the World War. That also came to light. For example, it came to light that USSR had signed a secret deal with Germany during the World War. The deal was, Germany will attack Poland, USSR will not say anything. USSR will get half of the Poland in return. That was a secret agreement. No one knew about it. It came to light when all these things were happening. So 100% transparency also may not always suffice or may not always be good. That is why even today the governments do keep some things as secret. There are different reasons for that. They might call it national security, they might call it different name, but the governments also today know that transparency is not always good. You can see these in your house as well, with your parents. You can see this when it comes to governments as well. We have the example of USSR. All of these tell that transparency, 100% transparency on paper might be excellent, but in reality it might not really be that great. So yes, transparency is fine, good, but you also know, not exactly something that you can implement 100%. Let me give you one more example. All of us, when we were in school, all of us read this important line, honesty is the best policy, right? All of us know this, honesty is the best policy. Now tell me, is there anyone who can say, sir, I have not lied even once in my entire life because I know honesty is the best policy? Can you say that? No, I have never lied in my life because honesty is the best policy. No. So saying something, ideally it should be implemented is one thing, but to implement that 100% is not really true. Same goes with transparency as well. That yes, government should be transparent, but at the end of the day, it is not always that the government has to be transparent, because the government also has certain things that they would want to restrict from people. Now, India is not the only country to have such kind of a law. The RTI law that we talk about, India is not the only country to have this law. Most countries, at least most democratic countries around the world, have this kind of a law. They have their own versions of it. When I say this law, I mean the Right to Information Act. The Right to Information Act, which we will discuss in detail in just a bit, similar kind of an act exists in most parts of the world. It is a part of something called SDG 16. What is SDG 16? SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. These are a set of 17 goals that nations around the world are trying to achieve by 2030. These are a set of 17 goals set by the UN that the nations around the world are trying to achieve by 2030. Goal number 16 is about right to information, that people around the world should have the right to information. That is why, as I said, most countries around the world, and not just India, have their own version of Right to Information Act. We have our own, but other countries also have this kind of a law. About 121 nations have adopted these kind of laws. 96 of them have this law specially written in their constitution as a constitutional right. In India, we don't have it as a part of our constitution, but we have passed a law for RTI in 2005. Now, let's come back to our government. Let's talk from Indian point of view. How do we ensure transparency and how does it work? How does the government ensure transparency in India? There are two ways mainly in which the government is expected to be transparent. One, proactive disclosure. Proactive means by itself. That means the government should by itself tell public all the information that we should know. For example, PIB. If you go to the PIB website, the government will tell you a lot of things. The government announcements, new government initiative, all of this is a part of the PIB. You will see in PIB, a lot of these things have been written. However, there are some information that you will not get on PIB, especially if there is an information which the government thinks is not really ideal for them. And information which does not show government in a positive light. That information is usually not seen in the PIB. But PIB is an example of proactive disclosure, the government disclosing information by itself. Ideally, if we are living in an ideal world, no one should have to file an RTI because everything should be on PIB itself. That is the situation of an ideal world. But we are not living in an ideal world right now. That is why if you don't find an information on PIB or on government websites, you then have to opt for something called reactive disclosure. Reactive means where you ask a question and the government answers the question. Government answers the question. This is what RTI is, right to information. It gives the right to the citizens of India to ask questions to the public authorities. Before RTI was introduced, it was introduced in 2005, by the way. Before RTI became a law, only few people in India had the right to ask questions to the government. Who were these people? Let me repeat my question. Before RTI became a law in 2005, only few people in India had the right to ask questions to the government. Who were these people? Yes, Suhasini. Okay, Akula. Chaitanya, right? Shashank is saying media. Shashank, are you joking? Media asking questions? Oh, just kidding. Okay. A lot of you are giving the correct answer. So basically, MPs and MLAs. MPs and MLAs. In Indian polity, all of you know about something called the question hour. In Indian polity, when you read about parliament, you all read about the question hour, right? What happens in question hour? In question hour, the MPs, the MLAs, members of parliament or legislative assembly or council, etc., they ask questions to the government and the government responds. So basically, before the RTI Act came into picture, only few people in India, the chosen representatives, that is the MPs, the MLAs, only they had the right to get information from the government. As common people, you, me, we did not have any right to ask questions to the government. That is what was changed after the RTI. That is how RTI actually became so important. It made people so powerful that for the first time, now common people, common citizens can even ask questions to the government. Now, where does this RTI law begin in India? If you want to go back to genesis of the law, how India started the RTI law, the story goes back to 1986. In 1986, there was a Supreme Court case called Mr. Kulwal versus Jaipur Municipal Corporation case. This was a case where the Supreme Court for the first time said that in Article 19, people have been given freedom of speech and expression. But freedom of speech and expression should include right to information as well. How? Let me explain this to you. Please understand this. What do you mean by freedom of expression? Freedom of expression means you can express yourself either by writing, by saying something, by drawing something, by making a video, whatever. That is called an expression. As per the Supreme Court, if a person has to express himself or herself successfully, they can only express successfully if and only if they have the complete information with themselves. Without having proper, complete, adequate information, no one would be able to express themselves. That is why the Supreme Court had said that in Article 19, when people have been given freedom of speech and expression, right to information should also be given to them. That was the first time ever that in Indian context, in judiciary or the government, talked about right to information. So right to information story goes back to 1986, although the law was made much later on, but the story of right to information goes back to 1986. Now, there was a law introduced by the government that most people have forgotten about in India. Most people have forgotten about it, but let me remind you. Before the government of India introduced Right to Information Act in 2005, we actually had a law in 2002, which people have forgotten about. That law was actually called Freedom of Information Act of 2002. This was our earlier version of RTI. Before the RTI Right to Information Act came in, we had this law called the Freedom of Information Act of 2002. It was a very similar kind of a law that you can ask questions to government authorities, they will reply. But it was not a very strict law, meaning that if government authorities did not reply within some days, there was no action taken against them. You could not even file an appeal anywhere if you did not get a reply. It was just a very generic kind of an act, allowing people to ask questions to government, but it did not really give any concrete rights to people. That was our first version of RTI, called the Freedom of Information Act 2002. When the government realized it, that it was important, that it is actually not something that is working well, the government repealed it very soon. The government repealed it very soon. That was our first attempt to make an RTI kind of an act, but it was repealed soon. Why? Because of all the problems. Problems such as no time limit given for the appeals, no appellate authority. Where do you appeal if you do not get an answer? No separate authority made, or no separate body was created to look into this law. All in all, it was a failed law, and that is why it was repealed. Because the government realized it is not really working well, so it had to be repealed. And then we had the law that exists even today. In 2005, the government of India introduced a law called the Right to Information Act, that is the RTI Act of 2005. Now, what is the act all about? What does it do? Let's see. In simple terms, Right to Information Act gives the citizens of India like you, like me, the right to ask questions. Ask questions to whom? Ask questions to public authorities. I'll tell you something from my memory. Again, since it is from my memory, it may be not exactly correct, but I remember I used to be in school when this law was introduced for the first time, 2005. And I clearly remember when the law was introduced, it was a big law. People were very happy because people thought that we will now use it. One of the first cases of RTI, one of the first, again, I'm not saying the first, one of the first. I still remember what was on the first case of RTI. I read it in the newspaper as a kid. So what happened was, there was a lady whose scooty, I think Activa it was stolen in Ghaziabad. Again, no reference to any state, but that's what I remember. So there was a lady whose scooty or Activa, I think, was stolen in Ghaziabad. So what happened was, she had filed an FIR. So she filed an FIR to the police officer, and the police officer, just like most other cases, did not really pay a lot of attention. FIR was filed, no investigation happened, etc. So this lady filed an RTI. What was the RTI about? The RTI that she had filed was, I want to know the status of investigation on my FIR. That was her RTI. That I want information about how much investigation has happened in my case in the FIR, what has the police done about it, and I want to get answers to those questions. Now, because it was one of the first ever RTIs filed, it became a big news. And there was so much pressure on that police guy that the Activa was given back to a lady within 7 days. Within 7 days of filing the RTI, actually she got the Activa back. So you know how powerful our police is, as you can see from this example. All they needed a slight push. So that push was given by the RTI. I am not saying that today also RTI would have the same impact. Unfortunately, today the RTI would not have or does not have the same impact, because that was one of the first cases of RTI. Now thousands and thousands of cases of RTI are pending. So that impact has gone out of the window. But I still clearly remember reading that in the paper and thinking, oh, this is such a great law. That is how the laws actually change over time. When it was first introduced, because the law actually had put a lot of pressure on the public authority. So when the FIR was filed, or when the RTI was filed, it would be filed against or in respect to a certain department of the government. That department used to come under a lot of pressure that you have to give a response to this within a specific time period. But now the impact has not been the same. And we'll discuss that as well. Why is it that it has not been the same? We'll discuss about that as well. Now, let's start with the main features of the Act. What does the Act do? what is the law of RTI, how do you file an RTI, how do you get a response. I'll tell you everything. Also, by the way, in the last batch of governance that I took here, and I was discussing this RTI thing only, one of the students of the batch did file an RTI. And she, in fact, responded me on the email as well, the response that she got. So I'll show you that RTI as well. The RTI was filed by our student and the response that she got. So I'll tell you that as well. Okay, let's start. So first, in simple terms, all the citizens of India have the right to information. Meaning that a foreigner, non-Indian cannot file the RTI. The citizens can file the RTI. They have the right to information. Like you, like me, we have the right to get information. Now, what do you mean by information? There has to be a definition, right? What do you mean by information? When I say I can ask for information from the government, what information can I ask for? Government records, government documents, memos of the meetings, emails, opinion, advice given by certain officers, all these things come under definition of the word information. So when you ask for information, this is the information that you can expect. Circular, sample papers, contracts given by the government, etc. All of these are a part of information. Those who don't know what is memos, let me tell you what memo is. Memo is kind of a short informal note. For example, let's say I'm sitting in one room. I want to pass on a message to an officer sitting in some other room. I will call a clerk. I will write something on a piece of paper. I'll tell the clerk, please give this piece of paper, a memo, to that official. That is called usually a memo. So memo is short, informal piece of information written somewhere. You just pass it on. That is called memo. Remember, we used to be in schools. There was a boring period going on, and we used to write something on a piece of paper that used to pass on from one person to the other person, third, fourth, fifth person. Those are memos. So memos is an informal way of communicating or passing on information. That is usually what memos are. So all these things, etc., come into what the memos are. All these things are a part of information. Logbook means order logbook. For example, what has the government ordered? If they are buying something, purchasing something, all that comes here. Now, the important part is, from whom can you ask for information? From whom can you ask for information? The law says you can ask for information from a public authority. Now, who exactly is a public authority? First, all the constitutional bodies are public authorities. So those which are constituted by the Constitution. Second, all the statutory bodies are also public authorities. Public authorities means constitutional bodies made by the Constitution. For example, UPSC. For example, CAG. For example, Election Commission of India. For example, Finance Commission. All these are constitutional bodies. All these are constitutional bodies. Statutory bodies which are made by the parliament passing a law. For example, National Human Rights Commission. For example, Lokpal. All these are examples of statutory bodies. TRAI, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. All of these are statutory bodies. Not just this, even executive bodies of the government. Even executive bodies. Executive bodies means the ones that are made or that have come into existence just by the order of the government. Government passed an order, this body was created. Nothing happened in the parliament, no changes in the constitution. The government passed an order, the body was created. It's an executive body. For example, Niti Aayog. So every government body is a public authority. Apart from that, there is another very interesting category. That is any NGO that is substantially financed by the government. Now, please listen to this very carefully. It says any NGO which is substantially financed by the government. Now, listen to this very carefully. First of all, there is no definition of the phrase substantially financed. Means how much finance is substantially financed, there is no clarity on that. For example, if the government gives 1 crore rupees to an NGO, is it substantially financed? Is it not? No clarity on that. So what is the definition of substantial finance? It depends from time to time. There is no clarity. That is one big problem of the RTI law. To which NGO can you ask question? To which NGO cannot ask question? There is no clarity. Second, why would a government give money to NGO? What do you think? Why would a government finance the NGO? Why would the government give money to the NGO? What do you think? Any idea? Any idea? Okay, let me give you an example. Nitesh is saying to convert black money into white. Nitesh, why would the government want to convert black money into white, man? Okay, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example so that you can actually understand. I'll give you examples of two very famous NGOs. So there are two very famous NGOs. NGO means non-governmental organizations. So there are two famous NGOs. Let me give you an example. There's an NGO called Pratham. Okay, now listen to this very carefully. There's an NGO called Pratham. Now, Pratham works in the field of education. They started in a very different manner. When Pratham actually started, what they did was Pratham published very low-cost storybooks for the children. So they published storybooks which everyone could afford, very interesting storybooks, very cheap in price, etc. Now, what Pratham does is they publish a report called ASER report, ASER. What is ASER? ASER stands for Annual Survey of Education Report. They published this report called National Survey of Education Report. Tell me this. Do you remember reading these kind of headlines in the newspapers? 80% of children in class 5 cannot read ABCD. 90% of children in class 3 cannot do addition, subtraction. Have you read this ever? These kind of headlines in the newspapers. These headlines come in from which report? They come in from this ASER report only. So this ASER report actually gives all these kind of headlines to us. That these many children of class 5 cannot read, these many children of class 3 cannot write their own name, etc., etc. This is the ASER report. So Pratham is an NGO that publishes the ASER report, very famous report for education. Whenever the government of India makes any policy on education, they usually refer to this report. It is very important because this report has been considered as extremely, extremely balanced, very well authenticated. So the government also relies on this report. So what happens is, now that this kind of a report has become so important, government might give some money to Pratham to conduct this survey. This is an example of why government, or how government would finance an NGO. The government would tell the NGO, okay, you are doing a good job. Why not you go ahead and conduct this survey? That is one example. Then there is also one more example. For example, have you heard of an NGO called Akshay Kalpa? Have you heard of this NGO called Akshay Kalpa? No? Okay. Okay, I'll tell you what is Akshay Kalp. So Akshay Kalp, again, a very, very famous NGO. What it does is it feeds food to poor people. So poor people who are on the streets, who don't have anywhere to go, who have not even cleaned themselves for many days or many weeks, they bring them, they clean them up, they serve them food. So Akshay Kalp, again, a very, very famous NGO, gives a lot of help to a lot of people. Very famous NGO. You can see videos about that. So government might help them also, that, okay, you are doing a good job, take this money as well, and you can serve the poor people. So this is an example. This is an example of how the government can actually, or may actually, finance certain NGOs. Now, it's not that every NGO will be financed by the government. Only a few NGOs are. The problem here is, which NGO will be under RTI, which will not be under RTI. There's no clarity on that. It only says substantially financed by the government. How much is substantially financed? No one knows. For example, let's say government of India has given 1 crore rupees to Pratham. Let's take a very random example. Let's say government of India has given 1 crore rupees to Pratham. Does it mean now you can file an RTI for Pratham as well? Doesn't mean you can ask questions to Pratham also. There is no clarity on that. Which NGO will be under RTI, which NGO will not be under RTI. That is a big problem, that substantially financed NGOs, no one really knows. Those who are cricket lovers in India would identify this logo, I'm very sure. This logo belongs to BCCI, right? Now, BCCI is Board of Control for Cricket in India. That is the full form, Board of Control for Cricket in India. Now, what is BCCI? BCCI is the body that controls cricket in India. As simple as that. See, there are some interesting exceptions in the RTI law. BCCI is one of those exceptions. BCCI is not a government body. Please understand something. Please understand something. Most of the sports bodies in India are government run and government regulated. Like the famous Wrestling Federation of India that is so much in the news, Badminton Federation of India, Hockey Federation of India. All of these are government run bodies. They are formed by the government, they are run by the government, but not for cricket. In running of cricket, government doesn't have any control. There is a private company, you can say, registered under the Companies Act called the BCCI that runs cricket in India. So BCCI is not a government agency. It's not run by the government. It has no connection to the government, meaning except Connection means Mr. Shah is the only connection, by the way. No other connection. Apart from that, the issue is BCCI doesn't take any money from the government. It is not controlled by the government. It is not formed by the government. However, BCCI is still under RTI. How did that happen? BCCI is still under RTI. Now, how are they under RTI? Let me try and explain this to you. So what happened was, and the story goes back to a few years. The story is related to what happened in the IPL. So a few years back, those who have been following IPL for many years would know this. If you have not been following it, don't worry, let me tell you. So basically what happened was, a few years back, there was a lot of corruption related news that was started coming out from the IPL. That there is corruption, there is betting, etc. that is happening in the IPL, people who have been making bets, match fixing. So Supreme Court of India made a committee to look into the working of IPL and the BCCI. That was famously called the Lodha Committee. Lodha Committee was formed by the Supreme Court. Justice Lodha was himself a retired Chief Justice of India. Lodha Committee was formed. This Lodha Committee then looked into the different types of issues. They looked into how exactly would cricket run in India, what is BCCI doing, what is IPL, and they suggested a lot of changes in the working of the BCCI, how the president should be elected, power of secretary, etc. All of that they suggested. Then one of the other things that they suggested was that BCCI should be under RTI as well. People should be allowed to ask questions to BCCI in the form of RTI. Now, BCCI obviously was not happy about that. They were not happy. They said, no, how can we come under RTI? We are not taking any money from the government. So what was the argument given here? The argument given by the Supreme Court was, number one, yes, BCCI is not a government entity. But if a cricketer plays from the BCCI, for example, let's say Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Sachin Tendulkar, MS Dhoni, whatever, whoever plays from BCCI, do you say BCCI is playing or do you say India is playing? When we just had the World Test Championship, do you say India is playing against Australia? Do you say BCCI is playing against the Australian Cricket Board? No. You say the word India. You say the country is playing, right? As simple as that. So if you are a private company, even then you are using the name of the country, as in you are representing the country. That means that you have to be responsible to the people, number one. That was the first argument given. That when you actually go ahead and play cricket, or your people play cricket, they're actually playing cricket on the name of India, not on the name of BCCI. First argument. Second argument given was that you have a monopoly in cricket. In private sector, there is no other agency that can claim that we also run cricket in India. There's only one BCCI. That is the second reason. Third reason, Supreme Court said that crores and crores of people in India follow cricket to the extent that they worship cricket and cricketers. When feelings of so many people are attached to one single entity, that entity has to be responsible to the people. If the entity knows that they have connection or they are representing so many people and their feelings, we cannot have a situation that that entity is not really responsible to the people. Because of all these reasons, BCCI is under RTI right now. So there are some exceptions like these as well. RTI is mainly for public authority. It is mainly for government bodies, government agencies, but it does have certain other bodies under it, including the BCCI, as we just saw. Arshdeep is saying repeat. Arshdeep, you have a BCCI contract, man. You want me to repeat this? Okay. So Arshdeep is asking me to repeat this. Let me repeat. So basically, first, BCCI, when their cricketers play, it's not that they are playing under the tag name of BCCI. They are playing under tag name of India as a country, number one. Second, they have monopoly over cricket in India. There is no other agency that runs cricket in India. If anyone wants to become a cricketer, for example, let's say you want to become a cricketer, there is no option for you but to play for BCCI. You cannot say, no, I will choose something else. I will not play for BCCI. You will have to play for BCCI only because there's no other option. Third reason, feelings of crores and crores of people are attached to the sport, which is being run by one single agency. So you have to respect their feelings and you have to be accountable and responsible to them. Because of all of those reasons, BCCI is also under the RTI. As you can see here, BCCI is under the RTI. It has been made time and time again. It has been repeated time and time again. CIC, we'll discuss about CIC in just a bit. CIC is Central Information Commission. Central Information Commission. We'll discuss about that as well. CIC or Central Information Commission is the body in India responsible for implementing the RTI law. They are responsible for ensuring that the RTI law works properly. They are responsible for ensuring that there are any issues with the RTI law, they will have it resolved. Now, let's come to the process of it. How do you file an RTI? What exactly is the process? See, when RTI law was first introduced in 2005, it was not very easy to file an RTI because you had to go to the respective office, then you have to file a complaint in written form, and then you have to give the complaint. But now it has become much, much, much easier. Now, you don't really have to go to the office. Everything can be done online, and I'll show you the portal as well. You can make a request online as well. It can be made in English, Hindi, or the official language of the state. So whichever state that you are in, whatever the official language is, you can use that as well. For generally, the fee is 10 rupees. There's a 10 rupee fee generally, but people belonging to, let's say, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, below poverty line, they don't have to pay a fee. So if you can upload the certificate that you are from SC, ST, below poverty line, etc., then you don't have to pay a fee. But if you are not from that category, you have to pay a 10 rupee fee. The interesting part is when you ask for information, you don't have to give any reason for the information. There is no information that you have to give, or there's no reason that you have to give. For example, let me give a very random example. What kind of RTI can you file? Let's assume you file an RTI about the new parliament building. Let's say you file an RTI that I want to know how many parking or how many cars can you park in the new parliament building? Or I want to know how many air conditioners does the new parliament building have? Or how much or how many rupees were spent in making of the new parliament building? Any of these kind of things. You can ask those without giving a reason. You don't have to tell why are you asking for this information. That is also a very interesting part of the law. This makes the law even better because now people can ask for information without thinking, oh, what reason will I give? You are curious, you can ask for information, no problem with that. This is how you can file it online. Go on Google and type RTI online and you will come to this portal. This is the online portal for RTI. See, one of the good things that has happened in the past couple of decades is that most of the government services have come online. Most of them. I'm not saying 100%, but most government services right now are online. So you just type on Google RTI online, you come to this portal. When you come to this portal, you have to make an account for yourself, make a new account, etc. If you come here, see here, it says submit request. This is where you can file the RTI. So to file an RTI, you go here, submit request. When you go to submit request, this is what you will get. This is what you will get. Now, look at this very carefully. Look at the first two questions. First question is, select the ministry or department. That is the first question. Select the ministry or the department. Second question is, select the public authority. Now, listen to this very carefully. Let us assume that you had to ask this question about the parliament building. Let's make an assumption that you have a question. You want to ask the cost of the new parliament building. Okay. Now, let's say you don't know which department is responsible for that. You don't know which ministry built the parliament. You don't know which department is responsible for that. So who will you ask this question to? If you don't know who is responsible for building the parliament building, who is responsible for making this or calculating the cost, you don't know this. The best part, please listen to this carefully. The best part about filing the RTI is you can choose any random department or ministry if you don't know which is the ministry. You can choose any random ministry or department, doesn't really matter. That is again one of the best things about the law. You can choose railway ministry, you can choose Department of Space and ask about parliament, doesn't really matter. Because what the law says is every government department will have an officer called PIO. Listen to this carefully. Every government department will have an officer called PIO or APIO. Who is PIO? PIO is Public Information Officer. APIO is Assistant Public Information Officer. Every department has it. So for example, let's assume that you chose Department of Space, Department of Nuclear Energy, Atomic Energy, whatever. And then you ask the question, what is the cost of the parliament building? Doesn't really matter. This RTI will go to the PIO of the department where you have asked the question. If it is the wrong department that you have chosen, then it is the responsibility of that PIO to transfer the RTI to the correct department. Okay, it is not your responsibility. You filed the RTI, not a problem. After filing the RTI, even if it goes to the wrong department, they will have to transfer it to the correct department. There is only one thing that will happen. What will happen? The only thing that will happen is, usually RTI law says that your response, the RTI that you file, response should be given within 30 days, 30. Usually when you file the RTI, you will get a response within 30 days, 30, that is the law. However, if you file an RTI to the wrong department, let's say you had to file an RTI to Department of Railways, but you filed it to someone else, then you will get a reply within 35 days. So 5 more days will be taken. That is the only change that will happen, nothing else. So if you know the department or ministry, great, go ahead, select that. If you don't know the ministry or department, select any random ministry department, doesn't really matter. They will get you a response anyway. They will transfer it to the correct department. Then you have to file normal details, your name, gender, address, etc. This is what you have to file. This is the online RTI form. You have to give your email ID, etc. After that, this is not the full form. There are some other details, your email ID, etc., where you will get the response. As I said, in the last batch, one of our students after this class only, in this class also, I'll request you to go and file any random RTI so that you can know how it happens. So she filed an RTI last time around, and this was a reply that she got. So the student filed an RTI. This was her question. The question she asked was, and you can see the date also, November 2022. So the question that she asked was, what is the cost of Gaganyaan mission in the upcoming space mission of ISRO? What amount of input costs are sourced from Indian companies, and how much is exported? So this was the response that was given to her. This was the response that was given to her. That is how it usually works. Okay. You can also go ahead, file an RTI if you want. That is entirely up to you, but that is how usually you get this. You get this in the emails, etc. You just have to give your email ID. Again, even now, if you want, you can go to the office to file a written RTI. That is also entirely up to you, but it depends. But I'll give you an example. So I filed a couple of RTI. I think I filed 3 RTI so far. I'll tell you what about my RTI is what I have filed. The first RTI I filed was, I think, many years ago. So many years ago, when Modi government first came to power in 2014, they started a new scheme. Have you heard about this? They started something called the Give Up Scheme. Remember? Or have you heard about this Give Up Scheme? Okay. I'll tell you what that scheme was. So basically what happened was, so this scheme was, earlier you used to get a lot of subsidy on your cooking cylinders. Now that subsidy has almost gone. It has almost gone to zero now. But earlier, the LPG gas cylinders that you use for cooking, it used to come at a subsidized price. So what the government did was, government started this scheme called the Give Up Scheme. The Give Up Scheme was, government asked people who are rich or who can afford to buy a cylinder without even a subsidy. So it was not a compulsory scheme. It was just an initiative from the side of the government asking the people, or making an appeal to the people, that if you can afford to pay the full price for the cylinder, please do that, so that the government's burden can come down and you can buy price at the full price. That was a Give Up Scheme. So what I did was, I think it was 2015 or 16 that I filed the RTI. I'll have to check my mail. I can tell you the date after that. So I filed an RTI. That RTI that I filed was, I wanted to know the list of members of parliament who have given up their subsidy. That was my RTI. That I want to know the list of those members of parliament who have given up their subsidy. The response I got was that we don't maintain a separate list for members of parliament for this scheme. Full stop. So they did not give any complete information. They just said we do not maintain a separate list for this specifically. That is what the response I got. So not all RTIs will give you the exact response. Some RTIs will give you the exact response. Some RTIs will not. I filed another RTI a couple of years back when India was going through the COVID-19 wave, the second wave. I filed an RTI asking how many ventilators have been imported from which countries and at what cost. So I did file an RTI. I did get a reply from that about how many ventilators have been imported from different countries. And also said it's an ongoing process. The government is still procuring more ventilators. So again, these are different types of RTIs that you can get. I also have a question. Many people are asking, can I file an RTI for state governments? Yes. See, public authorities come, or the definition of public authorities include the state authorities as well. So even if you have a question to your state authorities, you can file RTIs in your state authorities as well. It's not that the RTI only has to be for the government. It can be for the state as well. It does not have to be for the government of India. For the states, for local authorities, all of that is included. All of these are things that you can file under RTI. Now, let's listen to this very carefully. You file an RTI. Once you file an RTI, you will get a response in 30 days. Now listen to this very carefully. You file an RTI, you should get a response within 30 days. However, let's assume two situations. Please listen to this carefully. Let's assume two situations. One situation, you get no reply in 30 days, right? Let's assume you get no reply within 30 days. Or you get an incomplete or wrong reply. Incomplete or wrong response. Right? Any of the two things can happen. You either get no reply or you get incomplete reply or no response. Then what do you do? In that case, what you can do is you can file the first appeal. You can file the first appeal. I'll just take you back. See here, what does it say? Submit first appeal. Do you see this? The third option here, submit first appeal. This option is for those who are not happy with the reply that they got or they did not get a reply. Then you can file here. You can go ahead with the first appeal. Now, when you file the first appeal, who does it go to? It goes to same department but senior officials. In the same department, some senior official will get the RTI, then they will have to file the response. This is the first appeal. For first appeal, is there a time limit? Yes. For first appeal also, there is a time limit. 45 days is a time limit that you get. Within 45 days, you should get the response. Now, let's assume after the first appeal also, you did not get a response. Let's assume after the first appeal also, you don't get a response. It can happen. Then what do? Then you file the second appeal. Then you file the second appeal. In the second appeal, where does it go? The second appeal goes to Central Information Commission. Second appeal goes to Central Information Commission. We will discuss about Central Information Commission in just a bit. Central Information Commission is a statutory body that was created in the RTI law only. The responsibility of the commission is to ensure that the RTI law works properly. If the government is hiding some information, they will ask the government to release that in proper information. Now, what is the problem here? The problem here is in the second appeal, there is no time limit. In the second appeal, there is no time limit. First problem. Second big problem with the second appeal, you have to understand that the CIC, Central Information Commission, does not have a lot of powers. For example, let's assume Central Information Commission asks the government of India to give information about a certain RTI. The government might still say, no, we will not give it to you. So they don't have a lot of powers here. This remains a problem. Also, second appeal cannot be filed on the same website. If you see this portal, there is no option for second appeal, right? So what do? For second appeal, you have to go to website of Central Information Commission. For second appeal, you have to go to the Central Information Commission website. They are the ones who will look in. They are the ones where you can submit the second appeal. First appeal can be submitted here, but second appeal has to be submitted there. That is usually how this law of the RTI works. 30 days, the first response. If you don't get it, you're not happy with it, file the first appeal. Same department, senior official will handle. Now, within 45 days, you should get the response. Doesn't matter if you don't get a response, you go to second appeal. That will go to Central Information Commission. They will decide if the information has to be given or not. I'll give you an example. There's a famous author. I don't know how many of you have heard. Have you heard of this author called S.K. Dhar? Have you heard of this author? S.K. Have you ever heard the name? No? Or I think not Dhar Commission. I think not SK, some other Dhar. I don't remember. I'll check what the first name was. The author's second name is Dhar. So he has written a few interesting books. So one of the books that he has written, and so this is a real story. He has written two books, and I've read both of them, so I can tell you. So he written two books. First book that he wrote was about the death and the mystery of Subhash Chandra Bose. That was the first book he wrote about the history of Subhash Chandra Bose and how he died, etc. Then the second book that he wrote, second book's title was Your Prime Minister is Dead. Second book's title was Your Prime Minister is Dead. And that second book was on the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri. Anuj Dhar, thank you. Thank you, Harsh and Karan Shu. Anuj Dhar, sorry. Anuj Dhar was the name. So he has written a couple of books. A book on Lal Bahadur Shastri is Dead and a book on the death of Subhash Chandra Bose. So what happened was, why I'm giving you this example, listen to this very carefully. So when he was writing the book about the death of Subhash Chandra Bose, there are still documents related to the death of Subhash Chandra Bose which are still not revealed by the government of India. There are still many secret documents about the death of Subhash Chandra Bose. What did the government do about it? Photos, etc. of that. Who was behind that? Because you all know there's a long history for that. Many people believe that Subhash Chandra Bose did not die in the plane crash. Many people thought that no, he still lived after that as someone called Gumnami Baba. So there are many stories. There's a lot of mystery about that, the death of Subhash Chandra Bose, and I'm sure all of you would have heard about these mysteries. So what happened was, when he was writing this book, he filed an RTI to the government of India to release those documents about the death of Subhash Chandra Bose. The government of India said, no, this is a secret. We cannot release these documents. So he filed an appeal. Nothing happened. He filed a second appeal again. The second appeal was heard by the Central Information Commission. Central Information Commission invited him to their office. He went to the office of commission, and there was a government representative also who came there. Both the sides made their argument that why should we get the file or why should we not get the file. In the end, CIC said, okay, we will not allow or we will not force the government to release this information to you. That is how the CIC worked. I'm not saying in every case CIC will work in the same manner. I'm not saying CIC in every case will invite you to their office, invite someone from the government also. But that is a real example of how CIC worked in that case. When Anuj Dhar wanted information about the death of Subhash Chandra Bose and the files on the government, it was denied to him. So it's not that at every single time you will get a response. The government may not give the response, and it might happen in different ways. Now, as I said, information is to be given within 30 days. There is one exception. That exception is if someone's life or liberty is involved, then within 48 hours you will get the response. If based on your RTI someone's life or personal liberty is dependent, then you will get a response within 48 hours. Let me give you an example of this also, so that you can understand better. When you make a hospital, listen to this very carefully. Let's say you want to build a huge hospital. What happens is, when you build a huge hospital, you require a lot of land for that. You can go to the state governments, tell the state government, I'm building a hospital, it is for the public's good, so please give me some land. Because the governments always have a lot of land with themselves. They can give land either for free or they can give land at a subsidized price, etc. So let's assume you go to the government, your state government, you tell the government, I'm making a big hospital, please give me some land. So government will say, okay, we are giving you cheap land or free land or whatever. But in return, what do you have to do? In return, you will have to reserve certain beds in your hospital for the economically poor section of the society. That is EWS. Understood? You want to open up the hospital, you go to the doctor, you go to government, you ask for land, they will tell, we give you the land, but in return, what we have to do is, we have to make sure, or you have to make sure that you reserve certain beds in the hospital for poor people only, not give it to everyone. Understood? So now this story, and this is the real story, this story is of Delhi. So Delhi has a big neurological hospital, I'm forgetting the name. There's a big neurological hospital in Delhi where there was a patient who had a spinal problem, very big spinal problem. This patient, a poor guy, goes to this hospital. The hospital denies him the bed. The hospital says, no, we don't have any empty bed in the EWS category. They say, for example, they say that out of the 100 beds in total, 25 beds are reserved for EWS, but all of those are filled and we cannot give you an admission. So now this person files an RTI. This person says, I want to know whether the beds are occupied or empty. So now when this RTI goes in, that RTI is an RTI based on which someone's life or liberty is dependent. The person's life is dependent on the RTI in the response, right? So that RTI, the response has to be given within 48 hours. That's an example of how the 48-hour things works. If you are filing such an RTI, then you have to submit proof that yes, your life depends on that. Only then the response will be within 48 hours. So the responsibility of proving that your life depends on it, your liberty depends on it, is on the applicant who is filing the application. You will have to prove that yes, my life is dependent on that. So within 48 hours, you will get the response. That is how it works. As I said earlier as well, if you choose a wrong department, if you choose a wrong ministry to file an RTI, You will still get a response. The only difference is now you will get a response within 35 days and not 30 days. You can get a response within 35 days and not 30 days because 5 days will be taken for the APIO, that is the Assistant Public Information Officer, to transfer your RTI to the correct department. Again, this is the maximum time period. For example, when I filed the RTI, in both the times, I got the RTI response within about 10 to 12 days. So this is the maximum time period. This is not the time period that will always be taken. This is the maximum time period that will be taken. This is how the RTI law usually works. Now, under the RTI law, what exactly are the rights that are given to the citizens? How do you file an RTI? We have discussed that. What are different types of laws? First, you have the right, you have the power to choose your medium of request. Medium of request means you want to file the RTI offline or you want to file the RTI online. You decide that. If you want, you can file the RTI online. If you want, you can file it offline. It depends entirely upon you. You have this freedom. Second, you choose a language of request. We just discussed it can be English, it can be Hindi, or it can be your state's official language. Whatever the official language of your state may be, that can also be chosen. You don't have to give a reason. We discussed about that as well. You don't have to tell why is it that you're asking a question. That is entirely fine. Then all the fees is waived off or below poverty line. You have to give a proof. You have to submit a proof that you're below poverty line only and only then. In that case, you will not have to pay the 10 rupee fee. Then, if your RTI is rejected, see, for some reasons, your RTI may be rejected as well. For example, let's assume that you filed an RTI. The government will say that we will not give you this information. If the government rejects it, the government will tell you the reasons for rejection. The reasons can be anything. The reasons, for example, can be about that it is an official secret of the government, or it is a national interest secret, or the information is still confidential, or this is a personal information. All of this can be a reason for denying information, but you will be told about the reason why the RTI is being denied. Then, making of complaint, that is the second appeal, can be filed to CIC, that is the Central Information Commission, as we discussed. Or if your RTI is against a state official, then your second appeal will go to State Information Commission. So State Information Commission, Central Information Commission, both of these things, both of these authorities have been made to ensure that they will have or handle appeals that are made against the RTI order. Before I go ahead, let me take up a few questions that have been given to me, and then we'll go ahead. One question I have is from SS. What if life involved but chose the wrong department? What is the time limit? So SS, if you choose a wrong department, 5 days will be added. If the life is dependent on that, then 48 hours plus 5 days means 7 days. If life is not dependent, then 30 days plus 5 days. So if you choose the wrong department, 5 days will have to be added. Meenakshi is saying, can we file RTI regarding Niti Aayog? Yes. Niti Aayog is an executive body. You can. Then Shashank is asking, could you please explain here only public authority, anything that comes under the meaning of state? See, only public authorities, but when you see the definition of the word state, all the public authorities come under definition of the word state. You tell me the difference between definition of a state under article number 12 and the public authorities. All of these are the same only. In fact, when you see public authorities, it also includes those NGOs that might not be called as state, which are substantially financed by the government. So mostly they are the same. Yes, Akula, separate websites are maintained by state governments. Every state has their own State Information Commission. They have their own website. Central Information Commission have their own website. So these are two different things. I'll tell you one more thing. I'll tell you one more thing from my personal experience, and listen to this very carefully. See, the way that the laws work on paper, unfortunately, are very different from the laws that actually work in real life. It's very unfortunate, but that is the case. The laws on paper are different. The laws that work in real life are different. I'll give you an example, and listen to this example very, very carefully so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So this is an example of a very close friend of mine. This person, that the close friend of mine, belongs to a city, and I'll not tell you the name of the city or the name of the state, so that you don't really make judgments. So this person belongs to, let's say, a city called X, and the state is Y. Now, what happened was, They have been living in that city, their own house, for many years. All of a sudden, they got a notice from the municipality that your house is built on an illegal land where there used to be a water body. There used to be a pond in this area, and the pond was filled up by you illegally. You have made a house here, so you vacate the house. We'll have to basically tear apart the house. We'll tear it down, and you will have to remove yourself. You'll have to go away from here. So what happened was they hired a lawyer. They thought that how is it possible? We have been living here for so many years. All of a sudden, how can the government file an appeal or send us a letter saying that no, 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 you have to vacate your house? So what happened was they filed an appeal in the district court. Nothing happened. Then they filed an appeal in the high court of the state as well. Nothing really happened. All of them sided with the government. They did not listen to the family. So what happened was, now the reason why it was being done was that the NGT, National Green Tribunal, you might have heard of it, National Green Tribunal or the NGT, had actually filed an appeal or actually given an order a few weeks back. The order was every state government is ordered that all the ponds, all the water bodies in your area, which earlier used to exist, which don't exist now, all of those will have to be reclaimed. Reclaimed means you have to again turn them into water bodies. That was the order given by the NGT. So the government said that we are just complying with that order. Now what happened was, this friend of mine, who's a very close friend of mine, whose house is in question, this friend filed an RTI. The RTI that was filed by my friend was that give me the development plan of my city. So every city, most of the cities have a development plan. Development plan means there will be a big map of the city where it will be written in which place is there a water body, in which place would there be a construction, in which place offices will be allowed, in which place road will be built, etc., etc. So he asked for an development plan of the city of 20, 30 years back. In that plan, when he got the RTI, in that plan, there was no pond at the place where their house is right now. So they said that now the government itself in their RTI has actually said that no, there is no pond here. This matter went to the Supreme Court, because in High Court also their side was not being heard, so they went to the Supreme Court. And this Supreme Court hearing happened during the COVID-19 crisis. In COVID-19, as you know, Supreme Court was hearing the matters on Zoom. There were online hearings that were happening. So in the Supreme Court, when this matter started, in the Supreme Court, my friend's family submitted the RTI reply that showed that, see, the government RTI itself says there was no bond here. The government map itself says there was no bond here. What did the government say? The state government said in the Supreme Court that we don't trust the RTI reply. The RTI reply given by their own officials, they said that no, 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 we don't trust the RTI reply. It can be wrong also. Now, the question is, if the government itself is saying that the RTI law or the RTI reply may be wrong, we don't trust it, then how can the common people trust the RTI law? That the information given under the RTI is correct. If you're asking me, sir, what is a solution to this problem? There is no solution to this problem so far. I'm just telling you a fact of how the laws on paper can be very different as compared to the laws that we have in real life. In real life, the laws can be very different. However, on the other hand, on paper, the laws can be very different. For our examination point of view, you have to focus on what is a law on paper. Once you become the IAS officer, then you can go ahead and change the laws on ground. You will have the power to do that. You'll have the power to decide how the laws will be implemented. But at least for now, focus on what is the law on paper right now. Those who are asking what the Supreme Court verdict, Supreme Court case is still pending. Supreme Court dismissed the matter in about few minutes, and they said to the government, then give us the correct map. If this is not the correct map, then what is the correct map? Give it to us. And the date has never come after that. So it is actually something that is still pending in the Supreme Court. The matter is still going on. And okay, I'll tell you the name of the city and the state. So the name of the city is Gorakhpur, and the state you can know now. So the city is Gorakhpur that I'm talking about, and the state, you know what the state is. So basically, this is a matter that is still going on in the Supreme Court, because it's a very close friend of mine. So I have personally seen what the RTI was. I personally seen what the map was, how the response came in. But again, as I said, it's very different of how the laws are on paper and how the laws are implemented. But again, please understand, for the examination point of view, you only have to focus, at least for now, of the laws on paper. On paper, how the laws work, what does the law say. If the implementation is not correct, you don't have to be concerned with that for now. You become an IAS officer, you become the collector, the DM, then you decide how the law will work. That depends entirely upon you. Priyanka is asking on how many times a person can file RTI. Priyanka, there is no restriction on how many times you can file the RTI. Go and file RTI in whatever times or how many times that you want. Anyway, so what is the obligation on the public authorities? In order to ensure that the RTI law is properly followed, what is the responsibility of the public authorities? What are they supposed to do? First responsibility, they have to maintain their records in such a way that they can actually give out information as soon as possible. Has any one of you had this privilege to go to a government office where the files are lined up in such a manner that even if one file moves, you will get under the file and you will not be able to breathe? Have you had the privilege to go to RTO? Have you had the privilege to go to those offices where there are files over files over files over files? Now, if you have had the privilege, just imagine if someone asked information from you about something that happened in 1995. Which file will come up, how the file will be revealed, what information will be inside of it. It is a reality that many of the government records, many of the government files are destroyed. Why? Because of the rats and the mouse. Do you know that? It is so common. Let's say there was a lot of rainfall, water started to come into the file room, all the files were floating into water. All this is a reality. It's not that it has not happened, it is a reality. In fact, I'll give you another interesting trivia piece. Do you know there are certain, listen to this carefully, do you know there are certain states PCS, like the PCS exam that you give at the state level, there are certain state PCS who have not revealed their results some years back because there was so much flood apparently that all the answer sheets got wiped out. All the answer sheets were flooded. Do you know that? It happens. Now, I don't know how it happened, how did it not, but it happens. Also, let's say the police raided an office or raided a party and they got 100 kg drugs. This is all a reality. Listen to this carefully. Let's the police raided an office, a criminal, they got 100 kg drugs. When they will present it to the court, they will say, sir, only 60 kg is left. Why? Sir, remaining 40 kg was eaten by the rats in our office. We had kept it in our godown. Our godown has a lot of these rats, so they came and ate it, sir. We don't have the remaining ones. Now, you can't go and catch the rats. Anyways, after eating 40 kg of drugs, the rats will be running at such a speed you can't even catch them. So basically, because the remaining 40 kg can actually be sold for crores and crores of rupees in the market, this is a very common practice. It's a very common practice. So it is the responsibility of the departments also to at least maintain the records, computerize them as much as possible, so that at the end of the day, they can actually get the information to the public as soon as possible. All this has to be the responsibility of the public authorities because, see, government data is humongous. Government, you can never imagine what people may ask. They can ask any random question of 20, 30 years back. How will the government get that record? It's not as easy as Control F on a Word document and find the answer. Government records can be spread anywhere. So the government authorities have to keep all their records, their duty, etc. cataloged. And again, you can see these when you go to a government office. You go to RTO for your licensing purposes. You go to post offices. The worst of all will be the land revenue. You go to land revenue, the office of Tehsildar, etc. When you have to get a registry of your flat or you have to transfer ownership. These are the offices where you will see all these files stacked up one over the other, thousands and thousands of files. The other responsibility, listen to this carefully. Why should you even have to spend 10 rupees? To file an RTI, why should a citizen even have to spend 10 rupees to get information? 10 rupees may not be a big amount, but why even spend 10 rupees? It should be the responsibility of the authorities to publish all the information by themselves rather than waiting for someone to file an RTI. You have the PIB, why don't you publish all the information there? Why is it that the government will only publish information which makes the government look good on the PIB? All the information that makes the government look bad, that information is never on the PIB. So public authorities under the RTI law, it was not that the RTI law said that everyone should file an RTI. The RTI law was that the government should take up the responsibility to publish as much information as possible. Publishing more information will automatically make sure that people do not have to file the RTI time and time again by spending even 10 rupees, because spending even 10 rupees is not justified to get information from your own government. But unfortunately, that has not happened. As I said, give as much data as possible, suo moto. You all know what suo moto is? Suo moto means by itself. Rather than waiting for people to ask questions, by itself, you should actually go ahead and release information as much as possible to the common public. Not just this, every department should have their own public information officers. Who are the public information officers? The public information officer, as I said, is an officer who would be responsible for taking the RTI and then ensuring that the answer is given. As I told you, every government department has to have a public information officer, or it can also be APIO, Assistant Public Information Officer. It can be PIO or it can be APIO as well, Assistant Public Information Officer. The other part that we discussed, if a wrong request has come to your department, it is a PIO or APIO's responsibility to transfer it to the correct department within 5 days of the receipt. So that from 30, the maximum time period should only go to 35 days and not more than that. The appeal part, as I said, there were 2 appeals. First appeal will go to the same department, just a senior official. That will be replied within 45 days. Then the second appeal will be to the Information Commission. The second appeal does not have time limit. There is no time limit to the second appeal, but the second appeal can also be filed. Now, let me ask you this question. Let's assume that you file a second appeal to the Central Information Commission. Even they did not take any action. Now, can you go to Supreme Court? Will the Supreme Court do something? What do you think? Let's say you go to the CIC. Even they did not take any action. Now, what do? Do you go to Supreme Court? Can they do something? Okay, let me tell you what happened. So basically what happened a few years back, there was this case. A few years back, from the CIC, the person did not get a good response. The person went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, we cannot do anything. Supreme Court said that no, the RTI law clearly says that the responsibility of ensuring that the law works properly, the responsibility of ensuring that the people get the response under the RTI law is with the CIC. We will not interfere. So at least for now, the Supreme Court has stayed out of it. Supreme Court has said that we will not interfere. We will allow the Central Information Commission to run the law to make sure that under the law, the people get the information. We will not interfere. That is the present status. In the future, they might interfere. No one knows, because again, the Supreme Court has a lot of power. They have their own days. In some days, they may be in the mood to interfere. In some days, they may not be in the mood to interfere. But at least so far, they have not been in that mood to interfere. Okay. One more question very quickly. A couple of people have asked, this is a part of Article 19, then why is it that the Supreme Court is not coming in? See, in 1986, when the Supreme Court said that right to information should be a part of right to expression, it has not been explicitly mentioned since then. Since 2005, RTI Act was introduced, the Supreme Court has not specifically mentioned, like for example, for right to privacy or right to marriage, Supreme Court has specifically mentioned that these are part of fundamental rights. So you can go against them to Supreme Court of India. But ever since the RTI Act has came in, they have not specifically mentioned, explicitly saying that RTI will also be a part of the fundamental rights. Unless that happens, you cannot go to Supreme Court against it. So you'll have to see whether the Supreme Court comes in with that kind of a argument. If they do, then yes. But at least for now, as I said, for now, the present status is the Supreme Court has not interfered. And I'm repeating it. Tomorrow, if the Supreme Court does interfere, please don't blame me. Because in the name of judicial activism, in the name of Article 142, Supreme Court can interfere in anything. So far, they have not. I don't know the future. I can't predict the future. So again, if they start to interfere tomorrow, maybe they will. I can only tell you the present status so far. This is the present status. They have not interfered so far in any of these cases. They might interfere later on. Those who are asking about a break, we will take a break in just 5-7 minutes. Don't worry. We will take a break. Give me 5-7 minutes. We will take a break. Now, the Central Information Commission. The RTI law also created a statutory body called the Central Information Commission. The idea is simple. Central Information Commission is responsible for implementing the law properly. They are the ones who will look into the second appeal. They are the ones who will make sure that the departments of the government are properly implementing the law. They are the ones who will make sure that that action is taken against those officials who are not giving proper responses on purpose. This is the responsibility of the Central Information Commission. It is a statutory body. This commission is supposed to have a Chief Information Commissioner as the head and maximum 10 Information Commissioners. IC means Information Commissioners. So 1 chief information commissioner and maximum of 10 information commissioners. This is the composition of the Central Information Commission, 1 plus 10. However, on paper, the composition may be 1 plus 10, but in reality, almost never you will see 10 information commissioners. Almost never. Like right now, this is the status. Right now, we have the Central Information Commission, Mr. Y.K. Sinha, and we have 5 people working as information commissioners. Usually, you will always see that there are some vacancies or the other at the level of information commissioners. One of the reasons also is, as the law has progressed over the years, governments have also tried to weaken the law. The governments have tried to weaken the law time and time again. We will discuss about why the government is weakening the law, what is the purpose behind it. Let's take a 15-minute break. Let's come back. 8:05, don't be late, and we'll resume from here. We'll discuss why the government doesn't want a very strong kind of a law. Be back at 8:05, we'll resume from here. Thank you so much. Oops, sorry, not PM. That will be too long of a break. Bye-bye.